What's up guys, CEO here with the NES Season 3 draft recap. If you guys missed our live stream yesterday on August 12th, we basically had a 5-hour stream where the NES coaches got together and live drafted our teams of 10 Pokemon plus a Mega for this season. If you guys don't know, basically the NES is a 16-team Pokemon league where coaches got to draft their teams and we go against each other each week and be able to bring a 6-on-6 team and basically battle each other in singles. I've always described it as fantasy football meets Pokemon because that's the easiest way to describe it to people, I guess. But it's always been my favorite form of battling, so I'm pretty excited to get into this because honestly I feel like this season I actually have a team that really fits me. It may be a little unorthodox, I admit, but I feel like I'm actually going to be able to use it pretty well because it really fits my playstyle and it really fits like the versatility of offense and defense that I really like to bring. So first things first, I'm kind of going to be drafting stuff in what may seem like a weird order because we have a tiered draft structure. Basically, we have to draft a Tier 1 Pokemon, a Tier 2 Pokemon, 2 Tier 3 Pokemon, a Tier 4, a Tier 5, a Mega Pokemon, which you can potentially gain points for if you draft a lower tier Mega. And then we have 4 Pokemon that you basically have to draft from a set point total. This sounds complicated, but basically what this means is you have to take at least one Pokemon from every tier, a Mega Pokemon, and then based on a couple of different factors, you have a set amount of points to draft for other Pokemon across the different tiers. It results in a lot of planning, and honestly, heading into this draft, I wasn't really 100% sure what I was going to do, but one thing I did know that I was going to do was Zoroark was going to be a part of my team because it was a part of my Season 2 team, and I was franchise tagging it. So basically what this meant is, at the cost of 20 free points, I was able to make Zoroark my 11th round draft pick. Nobody could draft it before then, and then it was just my Tier 4 Pokemon heading into the draft. I really wanted to lock up Zoroark because just as a standalone Pokemon, this thing gets all kinds of coverage and all kinds of setup. People don't really expect setup Zoroark very often because it's not bulky in any means. Like it can take a hit if it's unresisted hit, like from a non-stab Pokemon or something like that. But it can't really take too many hits. And people don't really think of Zoroark as bulky Pokemon anyway, but basically I really like this thing's mixed offenses. I really like its speed tier at 105 because it allows me to pretty comfortably outspeed base 100s, and there's a lot of base 100s that Zoroark likes outspeeding, which is kind of nice. It gets a really diverse move pool with a lot of interesting things that you may not expect. It gets a lot of counter coverage, which is nice, especially since it got Sludge Bomb back in Gen 6 or something. And then, obviously, the main reason anyone takes Zoroark is for Illusion. It's a really awesome ability where Zoroark basically comes out disguised as whatever is the last member of your party. So last season I had a lot of Zoroark Nidoking offense. Spoilers, I actually don't have Nidoking for the first time this season. I wanted to give someone else a chance to use it, so I didn't even really look at it this season. But like I had Zoroark Nidoking a lot last season, so I would send out Nidoking and then people could potentially wonder, do I Psychic this thing, think it's Nidoking, or is it Zoroark who's just going to try to use some other coverage against me? I managed to fool a couple of coaches with it last season, and I'm pretty excited to see if I can keep it up again this season. Because heading into a draft with Zoroark means that I can kind of have a lot of offense built around featuring Zoroark in a unique way. Zoroark's not really a Pokemon that I've seen used super often in League format. Like I think the only Pokemon or only like major team I've ever seen use it that I've kept up on is Chimpac's team from the GBA. And obviously he used it well there too, but just the mind games that Zoroark brings are kind of unique, and I wanted to really build a roster around that this season. So 4 minutes in and actually heading into the draft finally. The first Pokemon I drafted this season was Jirachi. It was actually pretty high on my list, and I wasn't really expecting to be able to get it because I know it's a really solid Pokemon with a ton of coverage options. But I think other coaches just kind of had their eyes on other stuff, I guess. But I'm pretty happy to get Jirachi because it can go special, it can go physical, it has all kinds of coverage for both. Like basically anything you could want this thing for coverage, you can get it. It's a stealth rocker if you want that too. It gets U-turn, it gets trick, it gets healing wish if I want to support my team. It gets Doom Desire and Future Sight if I want to be a really unique like delayed damage set. Not that I've thought about that or anything, by the way. It also gets a ton of like other coverage and stuff like that. I don't want to give everything away for Jirachi, but I'm really excited to use it because I don't think Jirachi's been utilized as fully as it could be in the league, and I'm really hoping that I can bring it to the forefront. I think it's one of the more threatening Pokemon in league format because I got to use it a little bit in the Alolan Kahuna tournament, and I actually really liked it then. It gets pretty much everything you want, and then Serene Grace on top of that to double the secondary chances, or double the effects of secondary chances, I guess. I'm not saying that right, but whatever, you can read there. Basically, I'm excited to use Jirachi. I wasn't planning on going as hyper offense as I did for the beginning portion of this draft as a heads up, but I believe I kind of balanced it in a way that I can actually use a lot of bulky offense instead of just like straight quote-unquote hyper offense, and that really fits my playstyle well and was what I was trying to go for. So next up, I wanted to take something to kind of alleviate the fact that Zoroark gave me a franchise fee. Without overwhelming you guys, if I had not franchised Zoroark and just gone to the draft clean, I would have had 400 free points to take whatever Pokemon I wanted from the bottom tiers. Because I had my eyes set on a different kind of team, I knew that I would actually need more points than that, so I decided to take a lower tier Mega. Because there was really only one lower tier Mega that I had my eye on, like seriously. It was actually, interestingly enough, between this Pokemon and Mega Blastoise, but because I wanted another water type later, I ended up going a different direction. But I ended up actually taking mega-beedrill here, which may be a little bit surprising to people who haven't seen mega-beedrill in play, because it's honestly like not really one of the more prominent mega threats out there, but I think it has a little bit more versatility in league play than it's been given credit for so far. I really just want to play with a lot of stuff this season that I want to get my hands on, if I'm being perfectly honest. And I feel like I was able to do that pretty much across the board. I kind of compare Beedrill in some interesting ways to Mega Lopunny from last season, where it's just a really fast, really hard hitting physical attacker with enough coverage to be able to take out its threats. I actually personally think Mega Beedrill is a little bit better at taking out its threats than Mega Lopunny is at its. Mega Lopunny obviously has a lot better like neutral and super effective coverage for everything else, but I think that mega-beedrill's adaptability and base 150 attack kind of take it into a unique tier of insane wall breaker. Just even casually like doing damage to stuff to try to weaken it for other members of my team will come in really handy. Spoilers, I'm going to have a lot of priority later in the draft, so I really want this thing as just a huge chunk damage Pokemon, I guess. If I want to use it in more of a fast support role, which I do like fast support a lot, I have a lot of options here too as well. I can Agility Pass, I can Swords Dance Pass, I can Toxic Spike stack if I want to, there's Tailwind, and obviously U-turn is not even utility so much as like required on this thing a lot of the time because adaptability U-turn is awesome. But I think there's a lot of unique things that I can do with Beedrill, and the nickname Beokadelic is fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and toot my own horn there and say that I really like that nickname. So I'm excited to bring Beedrill quite a lot this season to show it off. So next up, I wanted something to take on the fire weakness that I'm starting to have for my team. I also wanted a little bit more bulk so Jirachi's not forced into just like 100% support role every single week where I have to bring it as a wall or I can't do anything. So I ended up picking up Donphan here. Again, it's a little bit early for a Pokemon like Donphan, I guess, because you don't really see it in standard ladder play. But it's a tier 3, and in my opinion, it's a pretty good tier 3. And since we have to take 2 tier 3 Pokemon in this draft, I really kind of wanted to lock down one of them early. And I really wanted to just make sure that my tier 3 wasn't just me rushing to whatever Pokemon was left, I guess. Donphan also gives me a really reliable rapid spinner, which is nice for mega-beedrill, who doesn't appreciate the rocks. My roster is actually not very weak to rocks at all, to be perfectly honest. I only have 2 things weak to rocks and a lot of resistances and stuff. So I just wanted to grab like a couple of hazard removers just in case. Donphan's one of the best at that because it gets sturdy, it also gets stealth rocks, and it also gets a lot of surprising coverage. Like you wouldn't expect this thing to get stuff like Seed Bomb and Play Rough and Ice Shard, but it does, because why not? As well as Bounce. I don't know why a ground type gets a flying type move, but whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of different things I can do with Donphan. I can even bring it as a low-key late game sweeper if I want to bring a rock polish set, because I have seen that do a little bit of work. But overall, I'm pretty excited to bring Donphan. And heads up, the next Pokemon, while it does fit this team, is also going to fit the theme of I have a lot of physical offense at this point in the draft. While Zoroark and Jirachi very easily can both go physical, it kind of neuters my physical stuff at this point, which I do notice. But I'm actually going to go ahead and pick up my water type and my fairy type here because it was still on the board, which I am super excited for. I've never gotten to use Azu in a league. But huge power Aqua Jet alone makes this thing a threat. Belly Drum shenanigans, I guess, are also nice, especially with a Zoroark, because you can't really hit Zoroark or Azumarill with the same thing super effectively. I realize Zoroark's pretty frail, but that's not really the point I'm trying to get at here. But basically, I want this thing for huge power, but I also think because of the offense that I already have on my team, I'll be able to actually run Thick Fat and Sap Sipper more than people expect, giving this thing 3 actually useful abilities. I feel like a lot of the times when people draft a Azumarill, it's specifically for a huge power wall breaker, and while that is nice and definitely a threat and definitely the set I'm going to be bringing like most of the time, I do want people to actually prepare for the fact that this thing does get Thick Fat and it does get Sap Sipper. I don't exactly have a grass weakness on my team beyond Donphan, but just be prepared for it, I guess. I actually have run Parasong Whirlpool against Nerd in the little preseason game that we just did, so I am prepared for it, and I am willing to use it. And while this thing gets a ton of good coverage for my team, I did notice at this point that I need something that could take a Will-O-Wisp, pretty much. So I wanted to actually get fast support, like I mentioned with mega-beedrill. I like more fast support options and like slow walls that can kind of get taken advantage of, because I'd like to be able to actually have offense as well. And I also noticed that my team like kind of had a unique blend of fast stuff and slow stuff. And I wanted to make sure that I grabbed just one more fast thing and then I could not really worry about speed for the rest of the draft. But if I grabbed one more fast thing that was basically faster than Zoroark, I could force coaches to have to prepare for fast thing, mega-beedrill, Zoroark, and Jirachi that are all above base 100. And I figured that was a good blend of stuff because most coaches don't really have more than like 2 or 3 things that exceed base 100, I've noticed. And I really just kind of wanted to push that speed tier up a little bit more. I also wanted something to be able to switch into Azu and Beedrill's weaknesses of electric and flying. So I'm going to take a pure electric type here, take my other tier 3, and as well as another EV evolution, since I have to have one of those every season apparently. And I'm going to take Jolteon. I'm going to be perfectly honest and say I actually don't have a ton of experience with Jolteon, but I actually really like its fit on this team. I needed a strong special attacker that wasn't Zoroark in case I wanted to bring something else in a week. I wanted something to obviously take Volt Absorb, or take electric attacks with Volt Absorb really well. I wanted something that could potentially outspeed stuff that would even outspeed mega-beedrill with Quick Feet, which I am perfectly comfortable with running because I've used it in a couple of games and it actually does a lot of work. I wanted fast support. This thing gets Heal Bell, it gets fast Baton Pass if I don't want to Volt Switch, or if I want to pass speed onto stuff, which is nice. It gets low HP wishes, but it still gets wishes. It gets both screens if I want to do that. I I'm listing a lot of the support options for this because I feel like Jolteon a lot of the times when it gets drafted is basically just drafted to be a fast volt switcher. And while I do want Jolteon to be a fast volt switcher for my team, I think I can actually bring out a lot of its other like random moves that people don't really see a lot on Jolteon. I'm pretty experienced with the evolutions at this point, and this thing obviously doesn't have like too different of a move pool. So I think I'll be able to actually use it fairly well. I'm pretty excited because, as you guys know, I love me some Volt Absorb or Absorb abilities and stuff like that. They're just really solid with my Switch heavy playstyle in my opinion. And I like evolutions, which is why I drafted Jolteon. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the next part of this, and I'll be right back. Alright, so next up I wanted to continue my trend of bulky offense, trending towards hyper offense, because that's the kind of playstyle I tend to play better in, I've noticed. I actually really wanted this Pokemon after Crazy. Actually, I really wanted this Pokemon back when it was in Tier 4, but then Crazy took it last draft and then showed how awesome it was, and then it got moved up to Tier 3. I still really wanted this thing even though it's in Tier 3 because it has base 600 stats, or 600 base stat total, I guess, which is the same as Jirachi, which is really cool. It's just focused in a different way and it does different things. Normal Psychic is a really, really underrated typing, in my opinion, because Psychic adds a resistance to the normal type that Normal's normally weak to, obviously. And then I'm immune to Ghost because I'm a normal type as well, which removes one of Psychic's few weaknesses, making this thing even bulkier than it needs to be. Serene Grace is obviously really awesome as well because, again, secondary effect chances are doubled. I actually said it right that time. And then on top of all of the awesome stats that it gets, it also has a pretty diverse move pool, both special and physical. And while you may not think that base 77 attack makes this physical move pool usable at all, Meloetta can actually transform into Meloetta Pirouette form if it uses Relic Song, and then it switches into a really fast, hard-hitting physical attacker. Actually, only a couple of points off of Mega Lopunny status, to be honest. It just doesn't get scrappy, and it's a little bit slower, I guess. But this thing, it can be very fast. Even the regular Meloetta form, which is supposed to be like the bulky form, is base 90, which a lot of people don't know, which I didn't know until I was having to prep against it last season. And this thing is super bulky. It's a really good Assault Vest user. It's a really good sweeper as well. It's a really good support Pokemon. It further adds to my Volt Switch core, which is kind of looking a little ridiculous at this point between Jirachi, mega-beedrill, Jolteon, and now Meloetta and Zoroark, which also gets U-turn. But I think I'll be able to kind of pivot around pretty well with this, and I'm really excited for the bulk on the team. And while I'm not really used to having dual Psychic types, I also kind of wanted to free myself from not drafting a Pokemon specifically because of cheer typing with something else. I was looking at another, I guess I'll add a disclaimer here and say that I was looking at another Tier 3 Pokemon that actually went undrafted. So if you see me make a move after how excited I am for Meloetta, it's because I just decided that that Pokemon fit the team better. But right now I'm actually really loving Meloetta, and I don't think I'm going to change it around that much, to be perfectly honest. Next up, while I have Azu to switch into Fire-type attacks, and I have a couple of bulky things that don't really mind Fire-type attacks, I wanted something that was a more direct answer to Fire-type weaknesses and stuff like that. Because while I only really have Jirachi and mega-beedrill as Fire-type weaknesses at this point, I feel like coaches are still going to prepare pretty heavily for it since they were my first and second round picks, meaning that obviously I'm going to try to use them a lot. I kind of wanted to... at this point in the draft, we had like a decent break between me picking Jolteon and Meloetta, I guess. And I was opening myself up to drafting some kind of weather this season. I've never had weather in like an official season before. I've actually used it like pretty extensively in all of the test seasons, but I've never really used it in a regular season before. I figured coaches weren't really going to try to go weather this season because it's not really seen as a play style that works consistently in leagues, I've noticed. But with the team that I drafted, I actually felt pretty confident in my team outside of weather as well as inside of weather, which I feel is pretty important. You don't want to draft a weather team with like your weather setter round 1 and make it super clear that you're drafting a weather team, because then people are just going to draft all the kinds of counters. But because I was able to wait until like round 7, I think, before drafting my weather setter, I feel like I actually managed to get it in kind of sneakily. I also had not drafted a tier 2 yet, so I went ahead and picked up Pelipper. Admittedly, there's stronger stuff in tier 2. I'm going to go ahead and be perfectly honest and admit that right now. But I felt pretty comfortable with my switch-ins to ground types, being that I have both Jolteon and Donphan, as well as Jirachi to switch in and go for Earth Power or something like that if I need to. But I felt pretty comfortable with my switch-ins to electric types. I felt pretty comfortable with my rock type switch-ins also, since I only really had mega-beedrill weak to it. This also gives me a very reliable defogger, as well as a pretty bulky Pokemon overall. It gives me another U-turner, which is ridiculous. I actually didn't notice it during the draft, but like well over half of my draft can U-turn into other bulky things on my team, which is kind of nice. And then obviously the reason I got this, which is what I was talking about, is for Drizzle. On switch in, the summons Rain Dance, so I'll be able to weaken fire type attacks on my team. I'll be able to make Azu fucking ridiculous, which I'm really excited about, by the way. I'll be able to make Jolteon be able to use Thunders instead of just Thunderbolts, which is nice. And I'll also have a Pokemon to be able to more directly abuse it. But as I was analyzing my team, I noticed that Rain actually fit it really well. When I was heading into the draft, I was actually planning on drafting a Hail team, which is kind of interesting, I guess. But I noticed during team construction and stuff that it just really worked a lot better with my team if I went with Rain, both defensively and offensively, which is the main reason why I went for it. But yeah, pretty excited for Rain this season. Next up, I wanted actual bulk on my team, and I had to get it from tier 5, basically, because with the team composition I had left at this point in the draft, all I was able to draft at this point was my tier 5 and 2 free Pokemon, and I had 120 points left over in my free tiers, which basically meant that I could take a tier 3, tier 5, tier 5 to close out the draft, or a tier 5, tier 4, tier 4 to close out the draft. Looking in tier 4, I decided I wanted 2 things, so I basically had to take my tier 5 and just kind of roll with it, I guess. I realized heading into the draft, or at this point in the draft, that I didn't really have like set cores, I guess. I wasn't really super worried about it, because I've noticed that having like a Fire Water Grass core or a Fairy Dragon Steel core is a little bit more hyped up than it actually needs to be for League play. But I did want a defensive grass type, because I noticed that defensive grass actually fit pretty well onto my team. It does give me another fire type weakness, I admit, but outside of that, it fits very, very well on my team. Gives me another ground type switch in, which is something that I was starting to build up somewhat of a weakness to. Gives me a water type switch in case people want to try to counter rain or something. And honestly, I've just always really wanted to use this Pokemon in League format, because I've always felt like it's kind of an underrated wall. Tangela basically does everything that Tangrowth does in tier 3, but at tier 5 with less attack and a little bit less HP, I think. Regenerator is a fantastic defensive ability that I was going to take pretty much regardless heading into the draft. Like, it was one of the few things that I actually knew heading into the draft. I'm going to draft something with Regenerator, and hopefully it's going to be a wall, because I like Regenerator walls a lot, because you could just pivot them in and out. And especially with how much Volt Switch and U-turn I have on my team, I feel like I'll be able to do fast pivots into Tangela to take hits, and then just switch back out, gain my health, and then just go for it all over again. Obviously, towards the tail end of this draft with Pelipper, Tangela, and a couple of the other Pokemon I'm taking, I'm focusing more on the bulky side of bulky offense, whereas before, in the beginning half of the draft, I was focused on the offense side of bulky offense. But I think overall it balances out to a pretty solid bulky offense team that both has hazards, removes hazards, has a bunch of different speed tiers. This gives me a couple of support options that I didn't have before as well, such as Leech Seed and Sleep Powder and stuff like that. It also, interestingly enough, gives me counter Sun if anyone decides to pick up Torkoal, or yeah, I guess that's a or Torkoal or Ninetales, I guess, since nobody drafted Zard Y. But if anyone decides to pick those up to try to counter my rain, I have a counter Sun Pokemon as well, which is nice. But it just has a lot of unique utility for a Tier 5 Pokemon. I wanted a solid Tier 5, or I wanted a solid Grass type on this team just because I noticed it matched well, even though I had somewhat, like, I keep saying I have a Fire weakness, but I only have 3 things weak to it, so it's not really that big of a deal. But I really just wanted Tangela, so I think it fits well. Next up, I wanted something, in case you haven't noticed, to switch into fire types. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk about Hariyama now, because it also does more than that, but that was the main reason why I wanted it. Base 144 HP instantly makes it one of the more bulky things on my team, even though it has base 60 defense and special defense. You would be really surprised how fat this thing gets with an assault vest. You'd be really surprised how fat it gets even when it doesn't have thick fat, and you instead try to Will-O-Wisp it and it has guts instead. I feel like it having guts alone will make teams kind of terrified to try to run status against it, but if they do and I end up using guts, basically attack is multiplied by 1.5, and then it completely ignores the fact that burn makes you -2 attack as well. So basically if they Will-O-Wisp me, I get +1 attack instead of -2 attack, which is nice. This thing also has a nice array of priority options with Fake Out and Bullet Punch and stuff like that. It'll be nice to counter the fairies that I go up against, although honestly I have a pretty solid roster for fairies because the only things I really have weak to it are Hariyama and Zoroark, and Hariyama and Zoroark both have answers to it, as well as me having Jirachi and Beedrill. So I'm pretty excited to face any fairy heavy teams this season. This thing also just has a ton of different support options with the elemental punches, whirlwind. It's bulky enough to actually take advantage of stuff like toxic stalling and stuff like that if I want to as well. And then if I want to just make it a wall breaker one week, because it does have base 120 attack, if I want to make it a wall breaker, I can just run Sheer Force, Life Orb, and just absolutely wreck stuff. I have a couple of options for Trick Room on my team as well. I didn't actually say that before, but if I do want to go full on offense with this thing, I can make it bulky guts user with Life Orb or something in case someone tries to burn me, which might be fun. Alright, so finally to wrap up the draft, after I drafted Pelipper, I knew I would be pretty safe on drafting my Swift Swim Pokemon, mainly because it's a Pokemon that has never been drafted in this league before. Even if it did get drafted, I had like 4 or 5 other Swift Swimmers that I would have been perfectly fine with from Tier 4, because I just noticed heading into the draft and preparing the draft that Tier 4 had a lot of weather abusers that were very, very good under weather, but pretty much useless outside of it. While I say that they're useless outside of it, I'm actually pretty excited for the other options that Amistar gives me here in Tier 4 to wrap up my draft and give me with a couple of points left over in case I want to make another free agency move or something. But Amistar is my Swift Swimmer, which means that it gets ×2 speed if it's in the rain. It has a ton of special attacks to take advantage of, and with a pretty decent special attack stat as well. It's naturally pretty bulky on both sides, but mainly focused towards defense. Even if I want to use it outside of rain, which is the main reason why I picked this over something like a Bootops, who's probably a better pure Swift Swim abuser in my opinion. But even if I wanted to use this thing outside of rain, I feel like I have a lot more options for it. I can Shell Smash, which instantly makes this thing a sweeper even outside of rain, which is really nice. I can use this to set every kind of hazard that's not toxic or sticky web, which is nice. I didn't have a Spikes user, and my only toxic Spikes user was Beedrill, so that alleviates pressure off of that. It gives me another Stealth Rocker, which allows me to have either Jirachi, Donphan, or Amistar as Stealth Rockers, which is really nice. And combined with my different ways of removing hazards, I'm pretty excited to potentially have Hazard Stack for the first time this season. Like, it's always something that I've wanted to do, and then heading into the draft, I just kind of, like, don't prioritize it at all. But this is the first season where I have Spikes, Toxic Spikes, and multiple Stealth Rock users. I don't really have too much that's actually weak to hazards on my own, but I do have one of the better Rapid Spinners in the game. I have bulky offense across the board, which I'm really excited for. And then on top of all of that, I have rain, which you have to prepare for, as well as a team that functions outside of rain. And then on top of that, I have stuff that's individually scary, such as Zoroark, Meloetta, Azumarill, Jirachi, mega-beedrill. Like, I'm just pretty excited for this roster. I don't know if you guys have noticed with how long this draft recap's gone on. But I'm pretty excited, and I think that this team's actually going to do pretty well for me. It fits my playstyle probably better than any other team I've drafted. I think I'm going to be able to mix up going super hyper offense some weeks and then actually going a little bit more balanced stall some weeks with the Pokemon that I have. I'm really excited for everything that I drafted, which is kind of nice. Normally when I go into a draft, I'm like, oh, this thing doesn't actually end up matching the team that I have. But I actually really think that my team composition overall is pretty solid. It's obviously a little bit more offensive than some of the other teams that I've had, but after last season where I kind of drafted bulk early, I kind of just wanted to make sure that I drafted something that I'm comfortable with this season. It's not going to take me half the fucking season to learn what to do because, spoilers, I don't have half the season to learn my team. I should know my team already. So I'm pretty excited to get into it. Week 1 is starting right away, actually, so the first week will be going up pretty soon. I battled JTN and the New England Rowlets, who finished the season last season with 1 win, but I am not sleeping on them at all because they completely turned it around with their draft. I'm not going to be doing team builders and stuff this season because people didn't really watch them towards the end of Season 2, but I will continue to preview both my team and my opponent's team. Hopefully I'll have my graphics made. I still got to get around to that, but I got to make my graphics and stuff, and I think I'm going to do something like I did at the end of Little Cup, where I have the full rosters basically shown at all times, because the way I like to build my teams is I build for all 11 Pokemon. I obviously skew it towards the Pokemon that I think are going to come, but I don't believe in not like preparing for something at all in League format, because I feel like if you don't prepare for something at all and then get swept by it, it's kind of your fault. So I'm going to get going now and actually start prep for that because I'm a little nervous about that week. But thank you guys for coming by. Drop a like and subscribe if you're excited, because I know I am. And let's hope that we can actually get the championship this time, because I've made playoffs every season and keep getting bounced early, and I'm a little frustrated in that. So see you guys later. Bye.